Thank you for joining us. This is Paul Wilson.
And Chris Emke.
And you're listening to the Diesel Performance Podcast. Chris, I want to kick off today's show with talking about WC Fab's latest video. Have you seen it, the 68 Suburban on the LBZ Duramax?
I saw pictures. I didn't see the video.
You didn't watch it?
No.
It's pretty short. It's a great episode 1. They're doing a body swap. Ryan Worley is on there a lot talking about, yeah, this will be easier than my truck because we've already done my truck,
right.
which I
Of course, Ryan.
love.
It's all easy when you're fucking Ryan Worley.
Right.
Yep.
Dude, they're shortening the frame on the Duramax, on the Silverado. Yep. Shortening the frame, doing custom body mounts, doing a body swap over. I will be following this build very closely.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely like, old school Suburbans.
This is my jam, for real.
Yeah.
Barn doors, yeah. It's
I just think
nasty,
about
dude.
the old school Tahoe you used to have.
Oh, that
wasn't
gem?
a 60s, but
that beautiful gem.
That was a beautiful teal gem.
Yeah,
pretty much same thing.
Yeah, dark green, forest green, motherfucker. And that awesome 6.5 that was in there. Love my 350 diesel. Anyways, okay.
Yeah.
Great video. Really, really impressed. WC Fab sponsors our From Facebook segment. We're actually working on a new production where we're trying to bring Jason onto the show to read off some of his Q&A stuff for the From Facebook. If you guys got questions about your diesel trucks, primarily your Duramax and your Cummins, jump on WC Fab or Worley Custom Fabrications Facebook page. Shoot them a message. Post on their page. Ask him something. Let him know you heard about it from the podcast. He'll be happy to answer to you personally, which would be really cool. Next thing on the agenda today, Chris, DuramaxTuner.com, Diesel Insights, data logging your diesel.
I love helping guys through data logs and data logging buddies' trucks and then having to explain those data logs. So I think this is going to really help some guys out and better understanding what the hell it is you're data logging and what that looks like.
Yeah, so for listeners who are newer to diesel, data logging is just basically us recording all of the engine parameters that we can.
And what that means is that the ECM is demanding, right, or asking the truck to do something. So the ECM sends requests to the injection pump, to the injector, timing tables, boost tables, all these different variables of the engine. And then if the truck is healthy, and there's no issue, the truck is going to respond within reason to what the ECM is demanding. So what the data log is showing is a demand versus an actual. And then there's a number that you're able to compare to see, does the truck cooperate with what the ECM, or in our scenario, the tune, is asking for?
Yeah, and even on trucks that aren't tuned or aren't highly modified, data logging can be pretty effective as you're trying to diagnose more complex issues.
Yes.
Hey, listen, if you're got an LB7 with 150,000 miles and it's got the stock injectors and there's a haze at idle, you have fuel in the oil,
I don't want you data logging
necessary,
it. Nope, I'm not going to walk you through a data log. I don't want to deal with the data log. You have bad injectors, replace them. The writing's on the wall, guys. You're not the exception.
If your speedo's off and you're 60 miles an hour on the dash but 70 miles an hour on your
data
GPS,
log isn't going to fix it. You already diagnosed that one too.
Okay. Now, on the other hand, if your truck is laggy and smoky and your fuel mileage is in the shitter and you just don't feel like there's any difference from tune 1 to tune 5, which should be a 100 horsepower spread.
I think of 5 variables right then and there, data log's going to come in handy.
Right. See, so there are things that data logging can help you with. Now, EFI Live is the tool we primarily use for data logging.
Those trucks, yeah.
Although there are others. We've used MM3 to data log some of the Cummins.
Yep.
I don't know how much our guys love to review those
EasyLink
logs.
for the newer platforms as well.
Yep.
I mean, realistically, the custom tuning platforms are going to get you there, whether it's HP tuners and your trucks, you're supported with that. MM3, EasyLink, EFI Live. For us over at Calibrated Duramax Tuner, EFI Live seems to be that staple because that's the software that we tune the most platforms off of.
Yeah, exactly.
But the reference is still there. The data logging is still within reason, similar across all platforms. So
absolutely. So really cool stuff there. I'm doing something a little bit different, Chris, for today's Exergy do's and don'ts.
Oh, yeah.
I had this throwback thought to something you had said on the show a few episodes ago.
Okay.
When we were talking about your fuel gelling.
Okay.
And you're like, I'm going to throw kerosene in it. Am I right?
Yeah, no. I think what I said was, hold on, in my defense, I said, I was recommended to do this. I might try it, which, by the way, I never did. I filled the truck up, and I drove the motherfucker, and I haven't gelled yet.
Fair enough. Okay, you did say on the show that you had heard about it. You said after the show you were definitely going to do it. I realized you didn't do it.
No,
but
I'm lazy.
I came across this great article in Diesel Power magazine called 11 Myths Busted. It's all the way back from March of 2013. Subtitled Clearing Up Diesel Misinformation. Chris, can you read number 6?
Kerosene is a good way to keep fuel from gelling. Response: wrong. It can help, but it will require adding more than just a couple quarts to your tank to make any difference. For instance, a minimum blend of 30% kerosene, 70% diesel is needed to reduce your fuel's pour point by just 15 degrees. As you can imagine, this will get expensive fast. Not only that, kerosene doesn't help much in preventing fuel line freeze-ups, it lowers cetane rating in your diesel fuel. Less BTUs means less energy and lower fuel economy. And it decreases the lubricity. If you want to keep your fuel from gelling up, look up additives specifically formulated to reduce gelling, such as Power Service Diesel 911 or Diesel Recovery from AMSOIL.
I don't endorse either one of those products
No.
personally because I haven't had much luck with 911.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if you can still get diesel recovery.
Yeah. One thing I want to touch on, and I brought this up before. So a gentleman that I grew up with years ago, he grew up and went to the high school in the next town over from me. But, casual Sunday fun day, I'm at a bar and I run into him, and good dude. And we were talking, he works for an oil company, right? And he works where they actually blend the summer blends and the winter blends.
Oh, okay.
So he was like telling me about what actually goes into, in the Midwest here, northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, what goes into that blended fuel.
Yeah,
Okay?
there's so much chemistry.
There is a lot.
Touch it. Yeah.
And the different stations that are in the area, different stations could have different fuel sources generally, which are going to have different additives in that fuel, right? So now, like I've been very vocal in the podcast before, I've never added additive. I've never believed in additive. It's something that I've never used. I've had diesels for 12, 13 years now, okay? And yes, this past winter, right, about a month ago, we were experiencing negative 45 degree days. Literally within a week, it went from negative 45 to plus 45. We had almost a 100-degree swing within 4 or 5 days, right? And yes, one of those days I did have my fuel gel up. Well, I also started going to a different fuel station, which just so happened to be a tad cheaper than anywhere else on that block, right? And it's on my way to work, right? It made sense. It wasn't just because it was cheap. It was convenient because it was right there.
I get it.
I didn't have to pull off of many other roads. So when the truck started acting up, now there were other guys that I work with here that have diesels and they didn't have any issues. And I'm the one that's sitting here having an issue, and I've never had an issue. I have the newest truck of anything that I've ever owned with the lowest mileage of anything that I've ever owned, and I'm having more issues than anything that I've ever owned. It's like, what the hell, right? So have we had any negative 40 degree days since? No, but we have had negative 10, negative 15. And I haven't had any issues, but I did flip it. I am going to a different fuel station altogether. Haven't added any additive. I've ran all that fuel out of the tank. So I do believe that it was some watered down, contaminated fuel of some sort that caused that.
Let me ask you something else. Actually, our lead tech brought it up. Have you changed your fuel filter since your fuel gelled?
Yeah, so I am like the one thing that I don't ever mess around with is servicing the truck. So my oil changes are anywhere from 5 to 5,500 miles, but that's like every 3 months. I put those miles on the truck. And my fuel filter, so I have a fast 165 titanium on there, and I do my water separator and fuel filter every other oil change.
Which is solid. That's a solid maintenance schedule.
That fuel filter and water separator in which the truck gelled under only had maybe 6,000 miles on it. So the minute that happened, the truck thawed out, swapped filters.
Let me say this. I actually got into a long debate with him about this.
Okay.
And a long debate with him meant it was like all of 4 minutes because I think he said
so
6 words.
Yeah, he's so soft-spoken, and he looks at you like you're dumb.
And he also just doesn't care to listen to my nonsense.
No one does, Paul. Like, dude, come on, man. You know this. I'm surprised your wife deals with
Here's
you.
my point. Your fuel gels is like water turning into ice. It's a reaction to the temperature.
Right.
There's no chemical change. So if the only thing that happens is your fuel got cold and it gelled, once it thaws and completely thaws, it's going to revert back to fluid.
Right.
Why are you changing the filter?
No, and I mean,
The only thing I could say that could happen is if the wax got so hard that it expanded and broke the filter.
Right. Which didn't happen.
Which doesn't happen.
And I mean, I never want to sit there because I'm smarter than you, Paul. No, I'm not. But I never like to agree with you. You know, anyone that understands our dynamic.
There's no
But I will
point
say,
here.
when I changed the fuel filter in the water separator, there was no wax. It was fuel, right? I'm not.
Yeah.
But there is the mixed perception, I think, that guys do that. Now, I'm going to be very blunt here. In a scenario where the truck is gelled, and you can't or you will not be in an area where you can allow the truck to thaw out, which is the best way to fix this issue.
Change the fucking filter.
Exactly. But I did have the truck in a 70-degree room for a day, and then I swapped it out just because of preventative maintenance. I hate my money. I like spending money on this stuff.
Listen, I'm cheap, and I would go and buy a filter as opposed to a bottle of Diesel 911.
Right.
That's just my opinion on it. If I could just drop a filter, throw a new filter on it, and just wait it out.
Well, I mean, but if you wait it out, but then you have the lines that are going to be gelled up. There are more things going in there.
Quite
so there are scenarios.
Absolutely.
You know, there are scenarios. There are things that take place. But nonetheless, I did it. When I dropped the filters, everything was fluid. There was no wax. There was no any buildup of any sort.
Right.
But I did it. It is what it is. It's done, you know.
It's not an affordable mistake if you were wrong.
No,
right?
exactly.
Or
yeah.
It's
not a couple $1,000 set of injectors, you know.
Like,
It's $40. Like,
yeah, I've spent more on less.
Yes. Yes.
All right. The other thing that I thought was really interesting out of this article was biodiesels and vegetable oils are the same. My brother actually works at an R&D facility on biodiesel, so I got to kind of verify some of this information against him. What the article says, a lot of folks believe these two fuels are very similar, but they aren't. First and foremost, a straight mix of either shouldn't be run through a factory fuel system. Biodiesel is too much of a solvent and too viscous, and vegetable oil is too viscous and corrosive. While a biodiesel blend is now present in most conventional diesel fuel at the pump, less than 20% can be found in it, hence the B20 compatibility ratings offered by the big three. Biodiesel can be made from vegetable oil and animal fats, but can also come from other natural materials such as soy, sunflower, algae, just to name a few. Vegetable oil is best known as a waste cooking oil or grease, and due to this thick viscosity and corrosive nature, it typically requires things like upgraded lift pump, fuel filter, fuel lines, not to mention the need to preheat it before sending it through your engine. I bring all this up because as we look at the future of the diesel industry and things that are happening in the diesel industry, concepts like fuel and where we're going to get our fuel from and what's in the fuel also become an impact.
Yeah.
So, Chris, you and I have been talking a lot offline recently about some of the developments with accessibility to exhaust systems. If you guys haven't heard, FlowPro is pretty much stepping out of the U.S. market or forced out of the U.S. market, however you want to phrase that. We're hoping to get some details from them. I actually reached out to one of their U.S. distributors to see if they'd like to come on the show in the future and talk to us more about the details. But essentially, deleting your trucks is going to become harder. And as people look around for alternatives, I hear things and I see things of people asking about biodiesel and other things like this. And what's the sulfur output going to be and things of this nature. You know, if it was more sustainable to source the oil, could the emissions be tolerated? Or all sorts of things around this nature. Really what I see is a lot of these things probably won't change. We will continue to run on diesel fuel, just the way we see it now, less than 20% bio. Right, that's the most likely, unless there's some sort of massive technology change in that market.
I think the technology change is going to be a big thing. You know, there's too many moving parts. You know, let's cut the emissions out of the equation for a second here, and let's just talk about the common rail injection system. Parts for the stuff is very expensive. When you're running on veggie oil and stuff, it's very hard on parts.
The corrosive nature of either one of these running through high-pressure injection systems is a lot different than running it in a 12-valve.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. You know, I ran this on my VP44 truck, and I even wouldn't do that, but, I ran this on my 12-valve, or I ran this on my 1990 TDI. That's awesome. Keep doing that. You know what? Second thought, let me buy the vehicle from you and let me do it, because that's awesome. Right. But when you start talking about, LB7 Duramaxes and just the common rail pre-emission trucks, it gets a little finicky. And then now, fast forward to today's standards, I'm not going to say that there's more complication because there's just more technology. Now, someone would argue, well, if the technology is there, then they would figure this out. Well, it doesn't necessarily work that way.
Yeah. There's got to be some sort of breakthrough to see that technology change. This article is realistically 6 years old.
Yeah.
So as we're looking at it, just over the last 6 years, we haven't seen that big jump in biodiesel. We're still looking at less than 20% biodiesel in the fuel at the pump. It's great that it's there and things like that, but we do have to start to consider what does the diesel performance industry look like. And I think a lot of the answers in that come back to using what we have. Right? Taking the tools, taking the resources that are available, and maximizing those to the best benefit we can. One of the things with that is emissions-equipped tuning. Obviously near and dear to our hearts, right?
Yeah. Deal with it on a daily basis.
So we're into the emissions-equipped tuning, and not from a save the planet standpoint, to be honest with you. I don't know that you have any political leanings in your life. I certainly don't.
I'm not political. I'm not going to talk politics with anyone, not because I don't want to get into the debate, because I'm not educated enough to even deal with it.
Right. Both of us are more into trucks than news, right? So that's just the way it is.
But
as we look at this, as we look at diesel trucks, and we look at what happens 3 years, 5 years from now, if you can't delete your emissions and you still want to get 600, 700, 800 horsepower like we talk about, we're seeing paths to get us there. Maybe not total solutions as of today, but we're seeing paths to get us there where
we have
650 horse emissions equipped. We know that's reasonable.
We've created a pathway that we're a lot closer now than we were 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago. Anything past 6 years ago, it was no man's land. It's just it wasn't there. But when I get guys on the phone, being my role in the organization, and I get those rebuttals, I get it. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But these are the same free-spirited individuals that probably had problems, or people alike, when electronic fuel injection came into the gas world. Now look at Demons and Hellcats and Mercedes AMGs and the Porsche 911s, GTRs. All these crazy high horsepower cars making 500, 600, 700, 800 horsepower from the factory turnkey with all the emissions. And people can look at us and say, oh, well, the diesel, it's cool to delete. Yeah, you know what? It is cool. All right. You guys are right. It is cool. It's cool to have a loud sounding diesel, because when I got into this, that's what I wanted. I was the guy, 12 valve, 5-inch exhaust, turn up the smoke screw, smoke people out when I was driving down the side of the road. I didn't care. I was also 18.
You're so cool.
I was, and then, you adult, you get a little older, and, you joke and laugh, but come on, man, you could take a tally, right, and ask all these different guys that call in and that we get to work with.
Yeah.
There was an attraction to the diesel.
Sure.
And those are the attractions. I don't care what you say. Those are the attractions.
Yeah. I'm not disagreeing.
Now time goes on. Now I use the truck somewhat for work. I tow, maybe once here, once there. But I like the quietness.
Yeah.
I do. But I think that comes with age, and you run into a lot of guys too. Well, I had an LBZ or I had an LMM, and it was all done up and had an exhaust, and it was deleted, and it was this, it was that. I got a 16, or now, with the new L5P support that I've been working with customers on, that's been crazy, crazy receptive. But the technology is there for us to take a truck, emissions equipped, tune it, have it operate and work very similar to how an emissions off truck would run. Whether it's the seat of the pants feel, throttle response, EGT control, general horsepower and torque output, that's not even a comparison. We're right there. But that's taken years of investing time, money, resources, taking a step back in an industry that was so delete, to look at now. I don't want to bash any company or anything like that, but, one of the main distributors for FlowPro said, listen, we're done. FlowPro isn't getting exhaust systems into the U.S. There's these things that are going on now because there is a change. And I don't care. It's not because of the president. It's not because of the lack of funding in the EPA, right? It's just this is the move forward. This is the future.
Yeah, this is where the industry's going, and that's where I say is I feel more and more confident as I see this happening, where I know it can be scary for a lot of people out there. We as enthusiasts do still have options. We do still have Fords, we can drive at over 550 horsepower. LML's over 500 horsepower. Cummins, you can do over 500 horsepower. So you can go to any big diesel truck and be over 500 horsepower with some pretty simple modifications. And you can retain the factory emissions equipment.
And then you can take some of those platforms and still add badass twin turbo kits where when you're in the cab of the truck, you hear the atmospheric turbo whine.
Screaming.
Every day. Every day I deal with it. Like, you know how nice it is pulling into my neighborhood and you cruise and you just hear the S400. It's badass. It puts a smile on my face, right? I also don't have to smell the shit when it's dry, when it's running in my garage.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
score.
No, it is. It's interesting, and one of the things as we talk about innovation, I think back to us being the official podcast of the Ultimate Callout Challenge. We're seeing a lot of innovation over there, especially as we come into 2018. We know that there's some new changes coming up. We know that there's a lot of tough competitors. We know that Levon, let's just call it out. Levon stepped out. He won't be there this year. We're going to have him on in the future to talk a little bit more about that. But right now, I think the biggest name in the Ultimate Callout Challenge competitor arena has got to be Derek Rose. And
one of the things that I want to touch on D Rose, you know, we're going to get into this, you know, as we do this, but he was a guy that tried to make an old dinosaur technologically advanced. You know, he did a common rail 12 valve.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, it's shit like that. You know what I mean?
It's
cool.
that type of innovation that we're always seeing drive this industry from the top all the way down to the bottom, guys. But hey, let's stop jaw jacking and bring him on. Derek Rose, how the hell are you?
Oh, doing pretty good. Just end of the day here at the shop. Kind of got all the customer stuff done and thrashing on the racetrack.
Oh, I love it. Okay, get that paying work out of the way, and then go work on the shit you already broke, right? We know how it goes. Now, Derek, for our newer listeners who maybe haven't heard you on the podcast before, we wanted to talk a little bit about your history in diesel performance in general. So maybe even before UCC, how'd you get started in this industry?
I kind of got involved when it was booming back in, like 2007, 8. It was pretty much when I started the company. We were just doing it for fun, and kind of just jumped on the bandwagon. I mean, EFI Live was just touching like the Dodge stuff with 06s, and we just started playing around. And 10 years later of breaking stuff and figuring out what works and what don't, and here we are.
I love it, man. I love it. Okay, yeah. So you've been doing this for over a decade now. A lot of experience with racing, a lot of experience with being around these high horsepower trucks. Tell me about the progression of power you've seen over the last 10 years.
I mean, just in the past 5 years, it went crazy. 10 years, I mean, good Lord, it was, if you were like 500 horsepower, 600 horsepower, you were king shit 10 years ago. In the street aspect, obviously the mechanical guys have been making power for years, in the competition. But
sure.
Street stuff it's come a long way. I mean, you went from just basic box tuners from your edge stuff and your bully dogs, making really good power to, full-on custom tuning with pretty much an endless supply of performance parts that you can, basically shop on, like shopping at Walmart, and you get, 1,000-horse combos at your doorstep.
Absolutely, man. It has been pretty crazy as we've seen over even just the last 5 years, Chris, that you've been around Duramax Tuner. How do you feel the difference has been in the street trucks since you started and now?
It's pretty. Derek touched on, Walmart style, like cookie cutter setups, things like that. I mean, it's 5-6 years ago, to have a 700 horse street truck was kind of unheard of. And then every year it's like that envelope gets pushed. And I mean, we've had trucks leave the shop here making 1,200 wheel horsepower that you could drive on the street and have really good street manners. Our Suburban, really good example of that. So yeah. I think it's just, tuning has advanced, technology has advanced with turbochargers. Let's face it, turbochargers are what makes drivability a potential, so
common rail injection along with that, yeah.
Tuning and turbos are...
I mean, just the audience, I mean, there, has grown, in the following, and, money, right? Money's driven,
Yeah.
a lot of our industry.
I mean-
and, a lot of people they just like spending money, and it's kind of what it takes to make things go fast.
No, I mean, and I think the going fast, that's the innovation, right? That's what drives the industry. And as the vehicles are able to make more power because companies are making the money, because enthusiasts are investing money into their own trucks to aspire to have something, it gives companies out there, even such as like what I do or what we do at our shop, it gives us the ability to say, okay, well, we can make this type of power. Well, now what do we have to do to scale things back to put it in a street application?
Right.
So it all works full circle. Like what the UCC does and helps us.
Yeah, and that's really where I wanted to drive this conversation, is seeing how the top of the line. I thought it was interesting, Derek, before we called you today. I went back now for the listeners who don't know, Derek's been at all of the UCCs.
Yeah.
Since 2016, he's been competing in this challenge. He's always been on the podium. He's really killed it here, made a lot of innovations. Now, does that mean that we're going to find a bunch of centerline drive, all billet 12 valve head, all billet block 12 valve head,
Well,
common
hold on,
rail
let's go back
injection
into
trucks?
that. Derek, were you a common rail 12 valve setup last year for 2018?
No, we went back.
You went back?
Normal stuff.
Okay.
Right.
So we'll kind of dive into that, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah. We're not seeing the exact builds come out of UCC trucks and go into street trucks, but what we're seeing is that as the top of the envelope got pushed past 2,000 horsepower, all of a sudden there's this whip effect where now the guys down the line who have smaller horsepower goals, it becomes just so much more and more feasible.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about that. So kind of walk our audience here through. Back in 2016, what did the UCC look like?
So 2016 was Salt Lake, right? It was first
Yes.
year.
You got it.
So it was, for competitor-wise, we were all, I know, like Levon built a brand new truck. I had a truck. We were all kind of going towards the racing aspect. And then when the promoters of UCC kind of started contacting us competitors in pretty much late November, it was kind of a Hail Mary, like, oh my God, like now we have to make our drag trucks, pull a sled, because that's one of the, one of the events. So that, like, I had a whole game plan all set out to, do over the winter, and everything was changed, right? Because now, I mean, you're constantly battling. I got to pull a 30,000-pound sled down in the dirt. So that was something to battle with. And then I think everyone just kind of showed up for the very first year. I would say a lot of people may be unprepared. I would say 90% of the people were all drag trucks that have never sled pulled in their life. So that was just something to, that caught people off guard. And then the conditions were a bit muddy. And dyno-wise, I mean, there was talks. I mean, 2016, it was like, oh, we're going to hit 3,000 horse. We're going to hit 3,000 horse. I mean, we're still not even there 4 years later. I think that was a big eye-opener. We had some pretty good, we broke 2,000 on the dyno. I think 4 other guys did. I think Rudy's, Ryan, Sean, and Levon. Maybe there was 5. I think 5 of us broke 2,000 horse. And that was huge, right? And honestly, we've all kind of been stuck around those numbers. For the past couple of years, there really hasn't been anything that's, been over 2,500 horsepower on the dyno. That's kind of, I think we've been able to make the power since then, but trying to keep things together has been the fight, right? Splitting blocks, breaking cranks, transmissions are always, the epitome of the sport, behind anything that's making a lot of power. So I think we innovated fast on making power, but it's just, the battle of trying to make the power efficiently by changing turbo size, different turbines. I mean, all kinds of little things, just trying to make what we maybe knew back then better.
Okay.
Sure. No, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, do I want to say we're at our limit? Absolutely not. I think somebody will come out, they'll hit the 3,000 horsepower. I don't know what year or what setup that'll be, of course, but this is how competition and technology goes.
Well, I mean,
we were seeing it in the racing field by itself as well. With last year, new records being set. It felt like almost every event.
Well, I think what's crazy too, you look at it, you look at the setups, triple turbo in 2016, 2017, and then 2018 rolls out, and guys are going back, that had triples going back to compounds, or some guys that were at compounds going to singles. Am I right, Derek? I mean, we're seeing that there's some different scenarios that take place to achieve what it is that these guys are after.
Yep, no, 100%. Like we've been playing around the single turbo. We already been out once this year playing around single turbo and with a new chassis, and it's just obviously for making the power. We can make a bunch of power with a single turbo and a lot of nitrous, but in this game that we play on, horsepower and torque is added together to, get for the overall winner. It's hard to make a bunch of torque on a single turbo.
No, you're going to lose. You're going to lose on the torque to make up the horsepower. Where if you go into compound, you're not going to have the big. Let's face it, you're going to have a big horsepower number, but it's not going to be as big. But then you're going to make it up in the torque.
Yep, exactly. So it's a fine line of what you want to try to accomplish.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that we've seen growing or kind of changing throughout the years of UCC is the level of competition and how tightly packed you guys are. As I was looking out at a spread for just like the points total for UCC in 2016, from you, Derek, to the top of the pile in 2016, a 463-point difference.
Yeah.
So kind of a big spread there. And after that, it really drops off, and guys are really far out. But that is, we go into 2017, first to third place, there's less than 150 points. Actually, you away from first place is only 49 points. And even last year, as I look at the top three competitors, less than 150-point difference. Derek, again, you're only 113 points away from winning. This group seems to be really tight, but we're also watching new faces come in as the UCC qualifier bracket brings in new competition every year. New guys are there to fight through this and to try to push out. How do you think that impacts somebody like you with 3 years experience, 3 game plans? You've done this, you've been there. Do you think you got more of an eye on somebody like Sean Baca or maybe like who's some of the other competitors, Wade Minter, who's done really good?
Yeah.
Or are you watching the qualifiers who have really had to kind of scrap it out, somebody like T-Pain or, that Trevor that's coming up and self-funded and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, we have our eye on everybody, right? Like you can't just focus on one person. You try not to worry about too many people. Like I focused on trying to just better my position from the year prior, or better my what I wanted to do better in each event. And then instead of focusing like a lot on what other people are doing. So, but you're always, wondering where each person's strong point is. Do I see somebody coming that we don't have our eye on? No, but I don't really have the time to focus on, a lot of people, what they're doing, just because we're so busy in our shop and everything that's going on. But
sure.
I also feel what we've been doing, like Levon, myself, Sean, Wade, a lot of the top 5 guys, and even Donovan, a lot of the people that are, that maybe did really good in one area, I think we laid a really good foundation. They can kind of see what we're doing, and, it's not really a big secret of, what we're doing in a lot of the different ways. I think just people have to look at setups, where your hitch is at, or how you're on the dyno, or how you're hitting the dyno, things like that. And there's just a lot of luck. I mean, at the end of the day, you go into a competition like that, it's just a luck. I mean, I had every year, where we should be our strongest, we've been the weakest. Our drag racing has suffered every year. If we would have done good on the drag strip last year, we would have probably damn well won it, but we didn't. So it's just the way it goes.
Sure. So, I mean, let's just go into it. Is this your year? Like, are you going into this, 2019?
I'll be flat honest. When we kind of agreed to go, it was based on Levon going and him pulling out. And I understand his way. He's got some family stuff going on, a kid getting born, and just, business things. It's kind of a bummer for me going into it, not having the defending champion there. It's I don't know, it's almost took a little bit of wind out of my sail, but I kind of hunkered down and said, you know what, we already invested a lot of money and time and making changes to the truck, and again, I'm just going to go there and not worry about who else is there. I really want to just better my score that I've done, the past 2 years, and I want to go there and beat myself, and then whatever happens, happens.
That's a really good outlook.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about your plans of how you want to see yourself accomplishing that. Yeah. So what are the things you're doing this year to improve upon last year's score, which, by the way, your score has come up significantly every year, at least by 100 points, 2471 at the end of last year. That's a combined total of the points awarded throughout the event. So the points are awarded based on how everybody else did. It's essentially a bell curve.
Yep.
But you have been growing every year. We've heard from several people, competitors and organizers. You're the guy who has his own points catalog or points spreadsheet in the truck, figuring things out in the pit while the competition is going on. What's your game plan this year? What are you going to do?
So this year, if you guys haven't, you're making the listeners aware, we as the competitors voted in, we are going to go actually drag racing this year. So every year it's been boring side-by-side passes, kind of boring for the fans, and boring if you're a racer. So this year the drag racing portion is going to be split 50-50. So we're going to actually do our time trials just like going racing. It'd probably be single passes, and your fastest time of the day, no matter if you're racing or if you're doing time trials, will count for 50% of your score for drag racing. And then your overall position when we go racing will count for your other 50%. So my goal there is to just go out and we're also going 8th mile racing, if you guys didn't know or your listeners didn't know. So that's going to be fun, and I just plan on going out and doing my thing. I mean, I don't know. I know there's a couple other faster trucks, but I think it's going to be really close because the weather's always can make things interesting. The track's usually a bit cold, so what you do on a 70-degree day in a nice prep track might not be the same on a 50-degree track that hasn't had a bunch of time into it over the season.
So
go ahead.
No, just to follow up here for some of the listeners, Paul included, as you were talking, he's looking in the space. So half of the race, sorry, Paul, half of the race is going to be like it was last year, right? You're going for a time.
Except
and
8th
then,
mile.
Yep.
Right, in 8th mile. And then the second half of the race is more or less proving if you're the better driver. You could have the fastest truck in the world, high horsepower truck, but you have to out-tree the guy next to you, out 60-foot the guy next to you.
Yep.
So now
for the racing.
Right, for the racing. So now you're getting a mix of both sides of this.
Yeah, I really like this addition. What we've seen in the past is guys come up to the line, and you could take a second or you could take a year to spool up and get the truck dialed in and get it set up just the way you want it, and then tear off down the line. That's helped some guys and hurt some guys, I think. It is really interesting to put this into a dual-purpose event. I think it'll also make Friday a lot more interesting.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's absolutely and that's what I mean. I look at because I've really been, I don't want to say a part, or I've helped them. We're trying to make the competition better. So I'm pretty vocal, maybe more vocal than I should in some aspects. But I look at it like if I'm a spectator, I don't want to go sit up in the stands and freeze my ass off if it's cold and watch single lane passes. The guys need to be prepared to go racing, and that's what most of the trucks are drag trucks. So if people don't know how to go racing, they need to learn, and we need to figure it out and keep it interesting for the fans.
Well, it's interesting.
So, and then
go ahead.
And then we split the competition up so that way, because to make it fair, Sean Baca, he's an outstanding competitor, one of the best trucks out there. He's not going to drag race well. We know that. He knows that. And he's got one of the biggest, heaviest trucks there, but he's also making the most power. So it's trying to make it fair, right? We can't just make it 100% drag racing. We got to make it fair for them as well.
I think one of the interesting things here is we've talked throughout the years, what's the difference between UCC and DPC? So Ultimate Call-Out Challenge and Diesel Power Challenge. And Diesel Power Challenge, we've said it's all about the driver. The driver and his team have to have that truck set up the right way.
Yes.
But that competition is testing really the driver, or the truck owner, I guess is probably the better way to put it, right? Because a good truck owner would know how to fix their truck and set up their truck.
UCC now is kind of incorporating that same mindset.
UCC is now thinking, so does the same person who drives at the drag race also have to sled pull?
No, they changed the rule. Like, well, it's kind of been a floating rule, not one I'm a fan of. Like, the truck follows the points, the driver doesn't.
Right.
So you can have a different driver, but I don't know. I mean, most every owner operator owns the truck and wants to operate it for the most part. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I don't really know if we'll see that much this year. In the years past, I think we've seen a couple guys switching, but unfortunately for most guys like myself, like, I'm the best driver, and I feel I'm the best person to be working on the truck when it breaks.
Right.
But it's a lot of stress, because you got to have your crew, and you can't be wrenching and doing everything and trying to be focused on driving too. That's where we struggled a bit last year. So.
Gotcha. Okay. What are your plans for changing the truck over from each one of the events? What kind of modifications do you plan on doing at UCC?
So we touched on the drag racing portion, so the dyno will be on Saturday. We won't make too many changes. Like I said, we're testing right now a single turbo for drag racing. If we can get our times where we want them and the truck's happy, I will probably leave the single on. We got 2 or 3 more test sessions for that. We designed a new triple turbo setup where we can pretty much put it on in about a half hour. So we can go from single turbo to triples in probably less than a half hour.
Wow.
It's really easy.
Okay.
We'll definitely have the triple turbos on for dynoing. Obviously, we kind of got our own little nitrous setup that I'm not really sharing, and because it works well. And obviously, different tires and wheels for the dyno, suspension stops, things like that will be set up for the dyno. And then pretty much after the dyno, it's a Hail Mary. Probably we're going to be working all night to get things switched over for the sled pull this year because of us. We cut the truck in half and fully back halved it and made it more of a drag racing truck. So it's going to take some work. We got to change ring and pinions, swap rear axle, weight box. I mean, I don't even want to talk about it.
So you're following what Levon was doing, year 2 back. You have a back half truck now, so there's a lot of driveline things that need to be swapped over to even consider hooking it to a trailer just to support the weight.
Yeah, and it's, we don't want to. We overbuilt the back half in preparation of doing the sled pull, so we kind of built it. I don't have my sled pull setup done. We have it kind of drawn up, and it's in my head and in my guy's head. We know what we want to do. And that's kind of how we built the back half a little bit stronger than if it was going normal, just drag racing.
Okay.
But yeah, there's quite a bit going to be swapping over. And the thing with the touching on the sled pull, we also voted in one pull this year. So you get one time to figure it out, and that's it. No 2 pulls.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's a big change.
A little bit of a change there. I don't know if everyone's going to be happy about it, but the thing was, there was no fair way to score it. So if you look at last year, the track was perfect when Levon went out. Like, it was never better. And then it totally went to shit from, by the time that a lot of us went. It turned, there were some holes, this, that, and the other. It was dry and dusty, yada, yada. So I believe, I don't know if it's set in stone, we're going to have one pull. Your top 5 guys in points are going to pull out of a separate bin. We're going to draw, so that way the top 5 guys are actually pulling on a near similar track. Because sled pulling, the track changes tremendously from the first hook to the 30th hook.
Right.
So to make that fair, and then touching back with the 2 pulls. So let's just say like last year, track turned out great, first couple hooks, and it went downhill. Well, then Mother Nature come out and dumped 2 inches of rain. Well, then the track went to hell. So Levon went out 340 feet, right, first hook, and everyone just kept stacking up back. Well, redid the track, redid everything. I go out, had a hell of a pull. We went like 305. There was no way we were going to pull as far as what Levon did, even if we had the power and everything was working right, because the track was way different. It was tighter. It was muddy, and it was, so how do you score that if it's scored off of, feet when you have two different runs, right? So that's why we just said, screw it. Sled pulling's always been one and done. You have your shit together, and you go out and you make it work. So.
I definitely like that idea. I mean, just to give the listeners some insight here on how much the points make a difference. Last year, Levon, 329.8. He pulled 864 points out of that. Derek, 301.25. He pulled 778 points out of that. So roughly 80-point difference in just 28 feet.
Jeez.
Right? So, like, there is a big difference. And when you're looking at between first and second place, there's only a 113-point total difference. Those 80 points, that could be a winning or losing pull, right? Like that could be the difference as you start to put those days together. And that's how important it is, that we're in a bell curve. I can see the idea of bringing the top 5 guys who's got the most likely chance at pulling this off. As the years go on and that group gets tighter and tighter, right. I can see that guy sitting in 6th place being really worried.
Oh, for sure.
Right? Because even if you're 6th or if you're in the 8th place and there's only a 200-point difference between whatever number of people.
Right.
Like you said, now we have also seen tracks get better as the night goes on. So what happens if the weather flips and the first 5 go out and they get the shit track and the guy in 5th place, he potentially is getting the best. I mean, there's no way to control this completely, right?
No, and and it's not the promoter's fault on UCC at all, but it was just like the track was baking all day and nobody was putting any water down. So I'm hoping, and I'll probably stay on some of the promoters a little bit, helping. Like, we need to have somebody back there watering and making sure the track's good. Paying attention. Like, that's their job, to make sure that track's good. And if we gotta do a little track prep in between, like, try to keep the track as fair as possible and not just let it go to hell. That way everybody has, pretty much the same chance.
Yeah. Gotcha. Absolutely. Well, hey, Derek, we definitely appreciate you joining our show and talking to the listeners. I know Chris and I and our producer Justin are really, really excited about going out and being the official podcast of Ultimate Call-Out Challenge. We're excited for the DPI Expo.
Yeah, no, I'll continue.
And we just want to give you an opportunity here. Anybody you want to give a shout-out to?
Just the guys that's been, behind us forever. We got BD Diesel, has been pretty much the number one backer of us for the longest time. Hardway Performance, Fleece Performance, Freedom Engine Racing, Trend, Diamond, S&S. We got CCI Driveline. They're right next door. I mean, they do all our drive shafts for us. I got Frank's Transmission. They help me, we pretty much repair all the drive shafts, or not the drive shafts, the transmissions, on a weekly basis when we're racing. Dynamite Diesel, they've come on board helping us on some of our fueling for the injector side. It's just a big, plethora of people that make this, make it happen. So we can't do it without them.
That's awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. And listeners, for today, this has been Paul Wilson.
Chris Emke.
Thanks for listening.
The Diesel Performance Podcast is brought to you by Calibrated Power Solutions, home of DuramaxTuner.com. Calibrated Power develops emissions-equipped calibrations for a wide variety of diesel powertrains, including the Duramax, Cummins, Power Stroke, John Deere, Case, New Holland, and many more. For more information and great customer service, check out calibratedpower.com or call 815-568-7920. That's 815-568-7920.
And you cruise and you just hear the S400. It's badass. It puts a smile on my face.